I want to tell you something right now, and I need you to sit up when I say it, because this one thing, this one single mistake has wrecked more marriages, ruined more friendships, broken more families, and stolen more joy than money problems, than cheating, than distance, than in-laws, than all of it combined. And the crazy part, most people will never even know they did it. They'll go their whole life blaming the other person, blaming bad luck, blaming it just wasn't meant to be. When the whole time the wound was self-inflicted. Stay with me now, because by the time I'm done, you're going to look at every relationship you've ever had, the one that ended, the one you're in right now, the one you're scared to start with brand new eyes. Here's the mistake. Are you ready? People walk into relationships looking for somebody to complete them instead of walking in already complete, looking for somebody to share that completeness with. Read that again in your spirit. Most folks are out here dating, marrying, committing to another human being, hoping that person is going to fix what's broken inside of them. They think, if I just find the right one, I won't feel empty no more. If I just find the right one, my daddy issues will disappear. If I just find the right one, I'll finally feel like I matter. And I'm telling you right now, that is the beginning of the end before it even starts. Let me take you somewhere for a minute. Picture two people. Both of them got holes in their heart. Both of them grew up feeling like they weren't enough. Maybe nobody told them they were smart. Maybe nobody hugged them when they cried. Maybe somebody left when they were young and never came back to explain why. Two wounded people meet each other, and it feels like magic at first, because for the first time, somebody is paying attention to them. Somebody is calling them beautiful. Somebody is texting good morning. And they mistake that attention for healing. They think, this is it. This is the one who's going to make the pain stop. But a person cannot heal a wound they didn't create. Only you can heal what happened to you. And when you ask another human being to carry the full weight of your healing, you will crush them. And eventually, they will either break or they will run. That's the mistake. Looking for a relationship to do what only you can do for yourself. Now, I know some of you are sitting there thinking, well, that's a nice speech, but that's not me. And I want you to really examine that, because this mistake wears a lot of different clothes. Sometimes it looks like a woman who keeps choosing men who don't treat her right, and she can't figure out why. But if she was honest with herself, she'd realize she doesn't believe she deserves better, so she keeps confirming what she already believes about herself. Sometimes it looks like a man who won't commit to anybody, jumping from one person to the next. Because deep down, he's terrified that if somebody really gets to know him, they'll see what he already believes, that he's not enough, and he'd rather leave first than be left. Sometimes it looks like two good people, married 15 years, sleeping in the same bed, but living like strangers, because somewhere along the way, they stopped doing the inner work and started expecting the marriage itself to keep them happy. Like happiness is something that happens to you instead of something you build. I need you to understand something about human beings. We are drawn to what is familiar, not to what is healthy. If you grew up watching somebody chase a love that never chased them back, some part of you got wired to believe that's what love looks like, chasing. If you grew up watching somebody get walked over and stay quiet about it, some part of you got wired to believe that's what love requires, silence. And here's the sneaky part. You won't consciously choose it. Your heart won't announce it. You'll just find yourself over and over again in relationships that feel eerily similar to the pain you swore you'd never repeat. That's not bad luck. That's an unhealed wound doing the choosing for you. So before I go any further, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really answer it, not for me, but for yourself. Are you dating from a place of wholeness, or are you dating from a place of hunger? Because a whole person chooses somebody. A hungry person needs somebody. And when you need somebody the way a starving man needs bread, you will eat whatever is put in front of you, even if it's spoiled. You won't taste the difference. You'll just be grateful somebody fed you. Now let's talk about what happens after two people get together carrying this mistake, because it doesn't stop them from falling in love. Oh no. It lets them fall hard, fast, beautifully, and that's the trap. The chemistry is real. The butterflies are real. But chemistry was never designed to sustain a relationship. Chemistry gets you in the door. Character keeps you in the house. And too many people confuse the two. They feel that spark and they think this must be right. It feels this strong. But strong feelings and right decisions are not the same thing. Some of the worst decisions of your life probably felt incredible in the moment. That's how feelings work. They don't ask permission. They don't check your future. They just show up loud and demand you follow them. I want to tell you about a kind of couple I've seen 1,000 times in 1,000 different faces, but always the same story underneath. They meet and it's electric. Everything he does is perfect. Everything she says is amazing. They can't imagine ever being annoyed with this person. 6 months in, some cracks start to show. He's a little more distant than she thought. She's a little more controlling than he realized. But they don't deal with it. Why? Because dealing with it means admitting the fairy tale has a flaw, and nobody wants to be the one who points out the flaw first. So they bury it. They tell themselves it's not a big deal. A year passes, 2 years. Now there's a list. Now there's resentment stacked on top of resentment. Like bricks, nobody's mortaring together, just piling up higher and higher. And one day that wall falls over and crushes everything, and everybody's standing in the rubble asking, how did we get here? I'll tell you how you got there. You got there one unspoken feeling at a time. You got there because somewhere back at brick number one, somebody decided silence was safer than honesty. And that right there is another face of the same mistake. Thinking love means avoiding conflict, when real love means having the courage to walk into conflict and come out the other side still holding hands. See, a lot of people think a good relationship is one without arguments. That is one of the most dangerous lies floating around out here. Two people with different upbringings, different fears, different needs, living life together, you're gonna bump heads. That's not a sign something's wrong. That's a sign two real people are actually in the room with each other instead of performing for each other. The problem isn't the friction. The problem is what you do with the friction. Do you address it with respect, or do you let it rot into contempt? Because contempt, that quiet, silent disrespect, that eye roll, that sigh, that whatever, contempt is a slow poison. It doesn't kill the relationship in one dose. It kills it one drop at a time until one day there's no love left to save. Just two people who used to matter to each other, now just tolerating each other, or worse, despising each other, and neither one remembers exactly when it started because it never announced itself. It just accumulated. I want you to hear this next part real clear because it's the heart of everything I'm trying to give you today. The biggest mistake people make in relationships is treating the relationship like a destination instead of a daily decision. You don't arrive at love and get to stop working. You don't say, I do, and now everything's on autopilot. Love is not a noun. Love is a verb. It is something you do again and again on the days you feel like it, and especially on the days you don't. And too many people fall in love with the idea of being loved, but they never fall in love with the responsibility of loving. They want the benefits without the discipline. They want the comfort without the commitment. They want somebody to show up for them every single day, but they haven't asked themselves if they're willing to show up that same way when it's inconvenient, when they're tired, when they'd rather be selfish. Let me break something down for you about discipline, because people don't like connecting that word to love, but I'm telling you, it belongs there. Discipline is choosing in the moment you don't feel like it to do the thing that serves the bigger picture anyway. And relationships require that constantly. Some mornings you're gonna wake up next to somebody and not feel 1 ounce of romance. You're gonna feel irritated by the way they chew, annoyed by something they said last night, tired of carrying more of the load than they are. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can act on the feeling, or you can act on the commitment. Feelings are like weather. They change on you without warning. And if you build your whole relationship on chasing good weather, you're gonna abandon ship the first time a storm rolls through. But commitment is like a house. A house doesn't move just because the weather outside got bad. It stands there, it holds its shape. It keeps everybody inside safe until the storm passes. And it will pass, because storms always do. I've watched people leave good relationships, good ones, chasing a feeling that they thought was gone forever, only to realize sometimes years later that the feeling wasn't gone. They just stopped doing the things that created the feeling in the first place. See, that spark you fell in love with, that wasn't magic. That was effort disguised as magic. That was somebody putting in work to make you feel special. The way they looked at you, the way they made time for you, the way they listened like you were the only person in the room. And when people stop putting in that effort, they don't just lose the spark, they lose it and then blame the relationship as if the relationship walked away on its own instead of admitting, I stopped doing what created the thing I miss. Now, here's where I need you to really lean in because I'm about to talk about something that trips up almost everybody, and it's this. People confuse being right with being loved. In an argument, in a disagreement, in a moment of tension, so many people fight to win instead of fighting to understand. They want to prove their point. They want the last word. They want the other person to admit fault. And they will sacrifice the peace of the relationship just to protect their own ego. I need you to ask yourself something hard right now. Would you rather be right or would you rather be close? Because you can have one or the other in that moment, but chasing both at the same time in the heat of an argument is how you end up winning battles and losing the whole war. You can be completely right about the facts and completely wrong about how you handled them. Being right doesn't mean anything if the way you delivered it broke trust, embarrassed somebody, or made them feel small. And once somebody feels small in front of you consistently, they will either shrink permanently or they will leave to go find a place where they can stand up straight again. I want to talk to you now about responsibility because this next mistake is one of the sneakiest ones of all. People wait for the other person to change first. Think about how many relationships are stuck right now, today, in this very moment, in a standoff, because both people are standing there with their arms crossed saying, I'll be better when they're better. I'll open up when they open up. I'll stop being defensive when they stop attacking. And nobody moves. Nobody moves because everybody's waiting on somebody else to go first. But here's the truth. Nobody wants to hear. You cannot control what the other person does. You never could. The only thing you have ever had control over in any relationship in your entire life is your own response, your own effort, your own growth. And the moment you accept that, something powerful happens. You stop being a passenger in your relationship, hoping the other person drives it somewhere good, and you become the driver of your own half. You cannot make somebody love you better, but you can become somebody who loves better. And I promise you, that changes everything, even if it doesn't change the other person. Because at the very least, it changes you. And you're the one you have to live with for the rest of your life. Let me tell you a story now, and I want you to really picture it. Because I think somebody listening right now is living some version of this exact story. There was a woman who spent years in a relationship feeling unseen. Every day she gave and gave and gave. She cooked, she cleaned, she showed up for his family. She remembered his mother's birthday when he forgot it himself. She supported his dreams even when it cost her some of her own. And she waited for him to notice. She waited for him to say thank you. She waited for him to give back a fraction of what she gave. And when he didn't, she got quieter and angrier and more resentful until one day she wasn't even mad at him specifically anymore. She was just mad. Mad at the whole situation, mad at herself for staying, mad at love itself for feeling like a job with no pay. And you know what the tragedy is? She never once told him what she needed. Not clearly, not directly. She dropped hints. She sighed loud enough for him to hear. She hoped he would just know. And he didn't know. Because most people are not mind readers. They are just regular, flawed human beings doing the best they can with the information they have. And if you never give them the information, you cannot be shocked when they fail a test you never let them study for. That's another mask this mistake wears, expecting people to know what you need without you ever having to say it, because saying it feels vulnerable, and vulnerability feels dangerous. But I need you to understand something. Silence has never fixed a relationship in the history of the world. Not one time. Silence just delays the explosion. If something is bothering you and you don't say it, it doesn't disappear. It just goes underground. And it grows roots down there in the dark. And one day it's going to push up through the surface in a way that's 10 times uglier than if you just said it plainly the first time it bothered you. Speaking up is not the destruction of peace. Speaking up is the protection of peace. The people who tell you to just let it go and let it go and let it go without ever addressing the pattern, they're not protecting the relationship, they're just postponing its collapse. Now, I also have to speak to the flip side of this because some of you don't have a silence problem, you have a scoreboard problem. You keep count. Every mistake somebody makes, you write it down somewhere in your memory and you pull it out later in the middle of an unrelated argument like ammunition. Well, you did this back in March. Remember what you did 2 years ago? And I need you to understand what that does to a relationship. Nobody, and I mean nobody, can grow in an environment where their past mistakes are stored as weapons instead of released as lessons. If you truly forgive somebody, you don't get to keep the receipt. Forgiveness isn't forgiveness if you're still holding it over their head every time you need leverage. And if you find yourself constantly cataloging everything wrong with your partner, ask yourself honestly, are you keeping that list because you're trying to build a stronger relationship? Or are you keeping that list because some part of you is building a case to justify leaving? Or a case to always feel superior? Or a case to never have to look at your own flaws because you're too busy studying theirs? That leads me to something I need to say plainly because it's uncomfortable, but the truth usually is. Some of you are more in love with being the victim in your relationship than you are with actually fixing it. Being the victim feels good in a strange way. It means you don't have to change anything. It means everything wrong is somebody else's fault. It means you get sympathy without having to do the hard work of self-examination. But I promise you, if every relationship you've ever been in had the same ending and the same complaints and the same feeling of being wrong, at some point the math stops adding up in the other person's favor and starts pointing back at you. I'm not saying you deserve mistreatment. I'm not saying abuse or disrespect is ever your fault. But I am saying if you keep attracting the same kind of pain over and over in different bodies, wearing different faces, it's time to stop asking, why do they keep doing this to me? And start asking, what is it in me that keeps saying yes to this? I want to shift gears now and talk to you about something that doesn't get talked about enough. The mistake of losing yourself completely inside another person. Now, this looks like devotion. It even feels like love in the moment. But somewhere along the way, some people stop having their own friends, their own hobbies, their own goals, their own identity outside of the relationship, and they wrap their entire sense of self around one other human being. And when you do that, you don't just lose yourself. You actually put an unbearable amount of pressure on your partner because now they're not just your partner, they're your whole world, your whole source of joy, your whole reason for getting up in the morning. And no human being was built to carry that. That's not romantic, that's crushing. A relationship is meant to be two whole trees growing next to each other, roots touching underground, branches reaching toward each other in the wind. Not one tree wrapping itself around the other so tight it stops the other one from growing at all. If you disappear into somebody, don't be surprised when you wake up one day and don't recognize your own reflection. And don't be surprised when they start to resent the weight of being your entire universe. You have to keep growing as an individual even while you're growing as a couple. You have to keep chasing your own purpose even while you support theirs. Because here's a secret nobody tells you. The healthiest relationships aren't the ones where two people need each other to survive. They're the ones where two people are already thriving on their own, and they simply choose every single day to thrive together instead of apart. That's a completely different foundation than needing somebody so you don't fall apart. One is built on strength. The other is built on fear. And fear-based relationships might look pretty on the outside for a while, but they will always eventually show their cracks because fear cannot sustain what only love was built to hold. Let me talk to you about comparison for a second, because this is a modern-day poison that's destroying relationships faster than almost anything else I've mentioned so far. People scroll through their phones, they see somebody else's highlight reel, the vacation, the surprise proposal, the anniversary post with the perfect caption, and they hold that image up against their own real, complicated, three-dimensional relationship, and they feel like they're failing. But you're comparing your behind the scenes to somebody else's highlight reel. And that is not a fair fight, and it never will be. Every single couple you admire has had ugly arguments you never saw. Every single couple you envy has gone to bed angry, has said things they regretted, has wondered if they made the right choice. You just don't see that part because nobody posts their worst Tuesday night. If you keep measuring your relationship against a filtered version of somebody else's life, you will always feel like you're losing a game that was never real to begin with. Now I want to bring you to something deeper, something that sits underneath almost every mistake I've named so far, and it's this. Most people never learn how to actually love because they were never taught, and they assumed it would just come naturally. But love is a skill. Let that sink in. Love is not just a feeling that overtakes you. Love is a skill you develop, like playing an instrument, like learning a language, like getting strong in a gym. Nobody picks up a guitar for the first time and plays a beautiful song. They fumble, they hit wrong notes, they get frustrated and want to quit. But if they stick with it, if they practice, if they study people who play well and learn from their own mistakes, eventually their hands know what to do without even thinking about it. Relationships work the same way. Communication is a skill. Patience is a skill. Managing your own emotions instead of dumping them onto somebody else, that's a skill. Repairing a rupture after a fight instead of letting it fester, that's a skill. And if nobody ever taught you these skills, if you grew up in a house where love looked like yelling, or love looked like silence, or love looked like walking away, then you were never given the instrument in the first place. You were just handed a broken one and told to make music. But here's the good news, and I need you to really receive this. It is never too late to learn. You are not doomed to repeat what was modeled for you. You are not sentenced to a life of the same relationship pattern just because that's what you saw growing up. The moment you become aware of a pattern, you gain the power to interrupt it. Awareness is the first act of change. You cannot fix what you refuse to see, but the second you see it clearly, you hold the power to do something different than what was done to you. That is not weakness. That is one of the strongest things a human being can ever do, to look at their own wiring honestly, without excuses, and say, this stops with me. I want you to imagine for a second the kind of person you would have to become to have the relationship you say you want, not the relationship you complain about not having, the one you actually want, deep down, the one you dream about, when you let yourself dream. What kind of communicator would you have to be? What kind of listener? How would you have to manage your temper? How would you have to handle your insecurities so they don't come out sideways as jealousy or control? What would you have to release from your past so it stops bleeding into your present? Because here's a hard truth. Most people want the relationship, but they're not willing to become the person that relationship requires. They want the reward without doing the work that produces the reward. And I'm telling you, the universe or life, or however you want to name it, does not consistently hand out relationships that exceed the level of emotional maturity a person is willing to bring. If you want something different, you have to become someone different. Now, let me talk to those of you who are in the middle of pain right now, who might be listening to this after a breakup, after a divorce, after somebody left, and you're sitting there wondering what you did wrong, replaying every conversation, torturing yourself with what if. I want to offer you something. Every ending, no matter how painful, is trying to teach you something. If you're willing to sit still long enough to learn it, instead of running straight into the next relationship to numb the pain. So many people rush from one relationship into another without ever processing what went wrong in the last one, and they wonder why they end up in the same place again, with a different name, a different face, the same exact heartbreak. Pain that isn't processed doesn't disappear. It just waits for you in the next relationship, dressed up a little differently, but it's the same pain, wearing a new outfit. If you don't take the time to grieve, to reflect, to actually extract the lesson from what just happened to you, you are guaranteed to repeat it. Healing is not a luxury. Healing is the entrance fee to a better relationship than the one you just left. I also want to say this to you clearly, because I think somebody needs to hear it plainly today. Not every relationship is supposed to work. Some people come into your life for a season to teach you something, to prepare you for who's coming next, and it is not a failure when that season ends. We live in a world that treats breakups and divorce like some kind of personal defeat, like proof that you're not good enough or not lovable enough. But sometimes the ending of a relationship is not evidence that you failed. Sometimes it's evidence that you finally valued yourself enough to stop settling for something that was never going to grow into what you deserve. Don't let shame convince you to stay somewhere your soul has already left. But I also want to speak to those of you who are still in it, still married, still committed, still fighting for something real. And I want to encourage you, because the world doesn't do a good job of celebrating people who stay and do the work. Everybody wants to celebrate the wedding day, but nobody throws a party for the couple who chose each other again on year 12, in the middle of raising kids and paying bills and forgetting who they used to be before all the responsibility, and they sat down and they looked each other in the eye and they said, I choose you again. That is one of the most powerful things two human beings can do. Not the falling in love part. Anybody can fall in love. Gravity does that work for you. I'm talking about the standing part, the staying part. The choosing on a random Tuesday with no anniversary, no special occasion, just an ordinary day, to keep showing up for somebody, to keep pouring into something that isn't finished yet, to keep believing that what you're building is worth more than what you'd feel in the short-term relief of walking away. I want to give you something practical now, something you can actually hold on to and use, because inspiration without application just evaporates by tomorrow morning. If you want to stop making the biggest mistake in relationships, here's what has to shift. You have to stop asking, what am I getting out of this relationship? And start asking, what am I bringing into this relationship? That single shift in question changes everything, because most unhappy relationships are full of two people keeping track of what they're owed, and very few relationships are full of two people focused on what they're contributing. You cannot control what you receive. You can only control what you give. And ironically, the people who focus on giving genuinely without keeping score, without using it as leverage, those are the people who end up receiving the most, because they create an environment where the other person actually wants to give back, instead of an environment where giving feels forced or obligated. You also have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because real intimacy requires you to be seen fully, including the parts of yourself you're ashamed of, the parts you usually hide. And that's terrifying. It's terrifying to let somebody see you cry over something that seems small. It's terrifying to admit you're scared or jealous or insecure. But here's what I need you to understand. Surface level relationships, the ones where everybody keeps their guard up, where nobody shows the real stuff underneath, those relationships feel safe, but they will never feel deep. And most people, if they're honest, don't actually want safe. They want deep. They want to be known, fully known, and still chosen anyway. But you cannot be fully known if you never take the armor off. Vulnerability is not the weakness that ends relationships. Vulnerability is the bridge that builds the ones worth having. I want to talk about pride for a moment, because pride is one of the quietest killers in any relationship. Pride is what keeps somebody from apologizing first, even when they know they were wrong. Pride is what keeps somebody from saying, I miss you after a fight, because admitting that feels like losing. Pride is what makes somebody stay silent in the car, arms crossed, jaw locked, refusing to be the one to break the tension, as if breaking the tension is some kind of defeat instead of an act of love. But I promise you, the strongest people in any relationship are not the ones who never bend. The strongest people are the ones secure enough to bend without breaking, to apologize without feeling small, to say, I was wrong, without feeling like they lost something, because they understand that protecting the relationship matters more than protecting their own ego. You will never build something lasting with somebody if your pride is always sitting at the head of the table, making every decision on your behalf. Now, I know some of you listening right now are thinking about somebody specific. Maybe it's the person you're with right now, and some of what I said today is stinging a little because you recognize yourself in it. Good. That sting means something in you is waking up. That sting means you're not too far gone to change course. I'd rather sting you with truth today than comfort you with silence while your relationship slowly dies from neglect. And maybe some of you are thinking about somebody you lost, somebody you wish you'd loved differently, somebody you wish you'd fought harder for, or somebody you wish you'd had the courage to walk away from sooner. Wherever you are in that story, I want you to hear this. You are not disqualified from love because of what you didn't know before. You were doing the best you could with the tools you had, but now you have new tools. Now you have new understanding. And what you do with it from here is entirely up to you. Because here's the thing about mistakes. A mistake only becomes a tragedy if you refuse to learn from it. If you take what happened and you actually sit with it and you let it teach you something about yourself, about your patterns, about what you need to heal before you can truly give and receive love the way it's supposed to be given and received, then that painful chapter becomes the foundation for the best chapter of your life instead of a wound you carry into every future relationship. Your past does not have to be your future. It only becomes your future if you refuse to do anything different with what it taught you. I want to leave you with this picture before I close because I think it captures everything I've been trying to say. Imagine two people standing on opposite sides of a river. The river is deep, it's got a current, it's not something you can just wade through carelessly. Now, one way to get across that river is to wait for the other person to build the whole bridge themselves and then just walk across once it's finished, taking no risk, contributing nothing, just benefiting from somebody else's labor. But that's not partnership, that's dependency. And eventually the person who built the whole bridge alone gets tired and resentful and stops building. The other way, the way that actually works, the way that lasts, is both people showing up to that riverbank with their own tools, laying down their own planks, working side by side. Some days, one person laying more planks than the other. Because life gets hard and effort ebbs and flows, but always both people showing up, always both people contributing something, even on the days it's hard, even on the days they don't feel like it. That bridge, built by two hands instead of one, can hold the weight of a lifetime. But a bridge built by one person, while the other just waits to cross it, will collapse the very first time real weight is placed on it, because it was never designed to hold two people to begin with. It was only ever designed to hold one person's effort, stretched way too thin. So I'm asking you right now, today, to look honestly at your own hands. Are you bringing planks to the bridge? Or are you standing on the riverbank waiting for somebody else to finish building something you expect to walk across for free? Are you dating from wholeness or are you dating from hunger? Are you keeping score or are you keeping your word? Are you protecting your pride or are you protecting your relationship? These are not comfortable questions. They were never meant to be comfortable. Comfortable questions don't change lives. But if you're brave enough to actually answer them, honestly, without flinching, without making excuses for yourself, you will walk out of this moment with the exact blueprint for why your relationships have struggled. And more importantly, the exact blueprint for how to build something different from here forward. Because at the end of the day, the biggest mistake people make in relationships was never really about the other person. It was about waiting for somebody else to be brave first, to heal first, to change first, to love better first, when the whole time, the power to transform everything was sitting quietly in your own two hands, waiting for you to stop waiting and start building.